welcome to the Strange Rainbows podcast, episode 1, Prologue. Hello world, thanks for checking out this new podcast. Let's start with a story to lead us out of this grey reality and into realms of fantasy. Through the Faerie door. Once upon a reality, there lived a dreamer. The dreamer lived in a grey world, and sometimes that put them in a grey mood. It felt like they were a gear in some great machine, always spinning, never getting anywhere. Every day they worked in the machine, and every night they dreamed. Sometimes they would dream of strange realms that didn't exist outside their imagination. Special, beautiful places full of magic and wonder. What if those worlds actually existed? Would they dare to go there and escape the machine? The dreams were bittersweet, for although the dreamer yearned for the faraway places, they surely didn't exist outside their dreams, so they would always be out of reach. They started to notice strange things around town. There were hearts and rainbows, leaves and found things, and there were the ghost doors. Have you seen the ghost doors? They could be a small, sealed door at the back of a closet, a large locked and bolted door with heavy handles down in the cellar, or one of those many metal utility cabinets out on the street, all different shapes and sizes, some with little hatches in them that had the dreamer wondering who or what lived inside. They saw boarded-up wooden doors with their scratches and flaking paint, doors that looked like they were hiding entry into a ghost house or led along a secret pathway or even into a different reality. There were many in town. Halfway up the wall were bricked-up doors with no stairs to get to them. Perhaps they used to lead out onto a fire escape or into a house that had been torn down, said the dreamer's rational mind. But their dreamful mind asked, what if? What if those doors still worked? And they led into a different place, a hidden city behind the town where the ghosts and strange ones lived. Perhaps it could only be seen if you looked for it sideways. As their daytime curiosity rose, so their nighttime dreams turned towards finding the right door and daring to go through it. Would it be a bricked-off door halfway up a building, a boarded-up wooden door with flaking paint, or a dark door at the bottom of some secret back stairs in an old cafe? Or perhaps the right door was not out there in the grey at all, but hidden somewhere inside the dreamer's mind. Perhaps to go through, they had to go in, deep down into the darkness where they could never see, to the place where the dreams came from. Some nights have a frisson of possibility when the veil between reality and the fantastical is so thin you could almost see through, maybe even reach your hand through and touch it, given the right circumstances. Samhain is one of these, of course, as are the other festivals that mark the changing of the seasons. There are thin places too, like the fairy forts and ancient woods, and given the right combination of time, place and energy, impossible things can happen. Some say the worlds of fantasy and reality can meet, and strange things can cross over to our world, as they're known to do on the night of summer's end. It was on such a night that the dreamer was heading home through the grey, distracted by their musings. It took them a moment to realize that mist had risen on the street around them, bringing a chill and obscuring their view ahead. Indistinct shapes passed by, some hinting at forms other than human. As they stopped to get their bearings, the dreamer noticed an incongruous patch of shadow on top of a low wall. The mist itself seemed darker around it, as if wisps of shadow were swirling out from it, like ink dissolving in water. They stared at the shadow, both afraid and fascinated. The more they looked, the clearer it became, until they realized it was an old black cat sitting there. No, not black exactly, but the color of shadow itself, so shadowy, the dreamer thought perhaps they could see right through it. It watched them with dark eyes that seemed as old as eternity itself and as deep as the abyss. "Hello, kitten," said the dreamer. "Any idea which way to go?" "Why do you dream of?" whispered the shadow cat. "Well, because Wait, what? Did you just talk?" asked the dreamer, a little surprised. The cat tilted its head to one side, as if awaiting an answer. Its dark eyes gleamed through the mist. The dreamer felt the urge to answer honestly, but they really weren't sure what the answer was, or what kind of a question it was the cat had asked, or if it had even spoken at all. "I don't know," they said, and felt a little deflated. "But I want to." The cat yawned, stretched and jumped down off the wall, heading along the narrow laneway that led behind the houses. Although the dreamer had been this way many times, they'd never noticed this laneway before. The cat was disappearing off into the mist. Wait up, "Won't you tell me what it means?" they called after it, but of course there was no answer. I should head home, they thought. Running off after strange cats was rather strange, and who knew where it might lead? After a moment of doubt, they hurried along the laneway before they could talk themselves out of it. The busy sounds of the street faded behind them as they went. It was like walking into a different world. The narrow laneway was charming and rustic, with grass peeking through the cobblestones on the ground, stone walls with ivy and occasional murals, bushes and flowers to each side. The mist lost its chill and started to show a few wisps of faded pastel colour, just a hint of deep red carmeline, a warm orangey butterscotch and a light pink mulberry. Here and there were intriguing objects and nooks to be investigated, but the small shadow up ahead was nearly out of sight, so they hurried on. They almost rushed straight past the door, so hidden and small it was. Just a last fading glimpse of shadow in the corner of their eye made them look down and see the small dark stone door tucked away behind a patch of dandelions, just the right size for a cat to slip through. It was half open, and the mist seemed to be swirling out of it, bearing the same strange, warm colours. "If that was only bigger, I could go through," said the dreamer. And suddenly it was. What they thought was stone was actually petrified wood, and it was a strange dark blue. Strange sigils or fractal patterns were engraved in the door, and ivy leaves around the frame. It had seen time and weather, as it was worn and scratched, with faded patches of paint revealing the dark wood beneath. It had hinges and handle of aged brass with patches of blue-green verdigris, and it was slowly swinging closed. The dreamer froze, like that one time they'd had a night hag, and try as they might they couldn't move a muscle. Were they at home in bed, dreaming? The rainbow mist, shadow cat, and strange door had a dreamlike quality to them. But so what if it was a dream? You can do anything in dreams, and after all this time dreaming of other worlds and ghost doors, they were so curious about where this one might lead. The door was nearly closed now, and in a moment it would be too late. They were sure that it would disappear as soon as it closed, and they'd find themselves back in the grey. That thought fired them into action. Quick as a flash, they grasped the old brass door handle. It was strangely warm, and not unpleasant to the touch, like a friendly handshake. They pulled, but the door was stuck fast. "Please open. I want to go through," they said, and after a moment the door started to give. They pulled harder, wishing the door would open, and then the resistance was gone, and it opened so suddenly they stumbled back. The rainbow mist glowed within, carrying the scent of unknown spices from far away. Taking a deep breath, the dreamers stepped through. It was like stepping into a rainbow of churning clouds. The vibrant, swirling colours, melodic sounds, and unknowable sensations were overwhelming. Up was down, and in was out. It was disorienting, like trying to walk straight after spinning round and round for a minute. All at once they felt like laughing with uncontrollable joy, or was it crying in despair? As the impressions seeped further in, they felt their minds start to dissipate out, unravelling, and they were sure they'd got the attention of some vast shapes shambling through the clouds, as they were drifting ever closer. "Step again," came a whisper in their mind, and since they still remembered what stepping was, they did. Their foot landed on the solid forest floor with a pleasant crunch. Now their senses made sense again, and they were heightened. Autumn leaves crunched underfoot with 100 different sounds as the dry leaves cracked and crumbled. They were in an ancient forest of oaks and elms, ashes and thorns, and some trees they didn't recognize at all. They could see every detail of the texture of a giant oak's bark, hear the insects crawling through the moss, and sense the sap pulsing within it. Beneath their feet, the soil itself was a cacophony of tiny pops and clicks made by the mini-beasts and elemental processes down there. Life at every level, from beneath the forest floor to the low bracken and tangled bushes, all the way up to the canopy far above. The forest was dark, and there was no bright rainbow door behind them, no mist, no way back. They breathed in deeply, catching the varied scents of plants, trees, forest animals, and things tantalizingly familiar but unnameable, and feeling something deep inside them starting to wake after a long slumber. As their senses returned to normal, the impressions flooding in became less overwhelming, and they headed towards a faint light ahead. Soon enough they reached the edge of the forest, where it opened out onto a wild meadow. The pale night-blue sky hinted at early evening, and a single path led through the meadow. It seemed like a good enough way to go, so that's the way they went. The path led them to the edge of a large, wild garden and curved in like it was leading them into a labyrinth. Somewhere up ahead, the top of a large ragged tree was visible, and what the dreamer found in that garden led them on a strange journey indeed. But that is a story for another day. And now here's a little poem about how I try to think when perfectionism strikes. Untumbled stones. Let the writer of stories write stories, and the teller of tales tell their tales. Set the poet to find an appropriate rhyme, get the artist to paint without fail. But if you think my words are not perfect, and my stories are untumbled stones, I can only agree, but it's something, you see, and the rough texture fits to the poems. I hope you can enjoy imperfection, because when polished they might lose their heart. Sure, the surface is scratched, and it doesn't all match, but there's beauty in untumbled art. What's this? So, there's a story and there's a poem. What else can you expect from this podcast? Well, each episode will have a single word theme to inspire a story, a poem, and a something else, maybe research or musings or who knows what. It's all original stuff written by me for the podcast. Over time, I hope it'll build up into a fantastical patchwork of cats, ghosts, shadows, rainbows, fairies, cosmic horror, psychological musings, tragedy, whimsy, postcards, and other strangeness. I'd like to thank my strange rainbow of friends for their inspiration and encouragement, without which I'd not have made it this far. Special thanks to Alyssa, Mick, Rosalind, Sandy, and Vi. The beautiful rainbow ghost on our logo was painted by Alyssa, my sister from another mister, and is used with permission. The music is Deep in the Dell by Jeff Harvey via Pixabay, also used with permission. We'll have a mix of fantasy, horror, and whimsy. There will be monsters, darkness, and swift violence, like in an old-school fairy tale, but we won't be dwelling on the details. I'd like to say it's for adults of all ages, and the inner child within all of us, but I leave it to any parents to listen first and decide. We'll have an episode on Wednesdays, and on Saturdays I'll be doing readings of public domain stories and poems over on Patreon. Please tell your friends if you like the show, tell your enemies if you don't, and tell the world it should just calm down a bit. At the very least, I hope this will be something to keep us entertained until we all return to the cosmic darkness that underlies our so-called reality. Next week, we'll have a story and a poem inspired by the theme of welcome and the start of our research file on the many facets of those strange and wonderful creatures called cats. I hope to welcome you there if you decide to step through the fairy door. Thanks for listening. The Strange Rainbows podcast is copyright Mindstorm 2024, all rights reserved. It is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to actual names, characters, businesses, places, events, or persons, living, dead, or imaginary, is entirely coincidental.